want to come a little closer? How close we want to come, y'all? How close we want to come? We can do that. We can do that. We can do that.
We're going to take the show on the road.
Yes, indeed. We'll move. I think this is a nice. I've always been on a panel where you just kind of sit. Well, let's move with it. Let's move with it. How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? Thank you for being here. Round of applause for yourselves. Cool. So, as you may know or you see, the title. I'll sit here, kind of in the middle. The title of this is Storytelling for Change, and for social change. And really the idea behind it is having conversations about different forms of telling stories. I believe we're all storytellers, like I mentioned. And so it's an opportunity to, learn from different versions of storytellers and different types of storytellers as well. So I guess we'll just kind of jump right into it. So each of you tells stories in different ways, through journalism, movement, art, poetry, education, and children's literature. I want to ask for all three of you, what drew you to storytelling as a tool for change? So what drew you to storytelling as a tool for change?
All right, thanks for that question. Again, my name is Tracy, and in regards to what specifically drew me to storytelling for change, I feel like it's a loaded question. I feel like it began based off of my own personal experiences and the environment that I grew up in. I learned to be silent when witnessing certain things, right? And instead of using my voice to stop or intervene or do those things, I was taught to be silent because being silent was the right thing. In actuality, while growing up, you learn, okay, no, being silent is kind of like the easier thing to do. So as I started to grow and things like that, I essentially began storytelling for change because I seen what was happening around my community, and I'm like, there's just something that needs to be done that is actually gonna reach people. And of course, storytelling can happen in so many ways. So in the art form that I chose to tell certain stories, I chose spoken word and I chose music. And I first began writing from the perspective of other people from the community, really disconnecting myself because I didn't want to be too vulnerable. I felt like it was just too personal and I didn't want people judging me for my experiences. But later on, I realized that telling my story was also very powerful because there's a lot of people who also were taught to be silent. So I was essentially speaking for those who chose to be silent because they had similar experiences. So when it comes to storytelling for change, what motivated me to do that was, again, my experiences, was seeing the things that were happening in my community and neighborhood. And and then essentially spaces like Rise. Earlier when I introduced Randall, I was talking about how he has an organization called Rise, and then other organizations as well created spaces for artists to kind of just tell their story. So that allowed me to then tell my story as well and then motivate me, because when you're around positive people and community, it's just reinforcing. So yeah, that's kind of what inspired me for storytelling for change.
Love that. Thank you so much, Tracy. Can we get a round of applause for Tracy K? So, audience, just one thing Tracy said that I really wanna pinpoint is, there's this notion that we all have a story. Do y'all believe y'all have a story? You believe you have a story? Can I get y'all to repeat? I have a story.
I have a story!
I have a story.
I have a story!
I have a story.
I have a story!
Indeed. And something Tracy said that I really loved was really about this idea about being vulnerable. We live in a world that tells us that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. When in reality, vulnerability is why we watch movies. It's why we listen to our favorite artists, because they're willing to be vulnerable enough to create an opportunity for us to be connected. And so I just want to just say something that Tracy said, because she's a very multi-talented person. She's humble, but my goodness, you give her a microphone and the room shakes. But Tracy talks about being vulnerable, and I think one of the most beautiful things about recognizing vulnerability is that it takes bravery, strength, and a lot of authenticity to be vulnerable. So I hope we can kind of shift our perspective on what it means to be vulnerable, especially as storytellers or people who go tell stories on a daily basis. So thank you so much, Tracy. Next, we got Talita.
Hello everyone, my name
Is this better? Yes. Okay, awesome. Hello everyone, my name is Talina, And similar to Tracy, I think she had a very good point to make. She said that a lot of times, a lot of our stories come from our personal experiences. And I'm only 19, but I am a children's book author. I write children's books to make sure that young children understand the importance of inclusion and accessibility for children with disabilities. And why children's books? I was a young kid when my younger brother was diagnosed with a peanut allergy, and I saw how quickly our lives changed. And at 6 years old, I was like, I can't do anything. I don't know how to do this. But then when I was 16, I started volunteering at a children's rehab, and I saw that so many other kids with different situations were also facing similar challenges in terms of social isolation. And that's when I was like, I think I should do something. And teaching young kids the importance allows adults to become aware of the importance. And so my brother's here today. He's over there in the yellow. But yeah, he's an awesome person. And so this is why I do what I do, and I'm able to do so because of the amazing people and the positive people that I'm surrounded by. So that's a little bit about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I absolutely love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, audience. Y'all are amazing. And for our last panelist, this is kind of more like an introductory question, and I hope you get to learn a little bit more about these artists, but we have Janella. Tell us a little bit about how you got into storytelling.
Hi, my name is Janella Massa. I'm best known as a journalist. I worked at the City News and CBC. I now work in PR and do media consulting. And both of those fields have to do with storytelling. When I was that kid who wouldn't shut up in class. Janella's a good student, but she talks too much when she's not supposed to. And so I always knew, I wanted to be in the spotlight. I was going to lean into a career that lended well to my strengths. And I thought, I share a birthday with Oprah, so it's kind of serendipitous. And then I got to my first internship at CTV Toronto. It was the largest local newsroom in the country, in the most diverse city in the world. And that newsroom did not look anything like the Toronto that I knew, that I had grown up in. And by extension, I noticed the types of stories that were being told, the types of issues that were being focused on, the voices that were seen as important. Were often from only one sort of viewpoint, and it was leaving out a big segment of the population, a big segment of their viewers, a big segment of the communities that I belonged to and the realities that I had grown up in and lived in. And so I realized the importance of being that voice, of telling those stories. And I realized also, initially I thought I was going to get into, some sort of lifestyle talk show. I wasn't really interested in politics. But I realized that local news especially was just storytelling. And that, as you said, everybody has a story. We just have to ask. And we just have to realize that actually everyone's story is important, but sometimes we're only asking to hear stories from certain people. And so that really kind of became a motivating factor for me throughout my career.
I love that. Round of applause for Janella, please. I really love that. I love this. It feels a little bit more connected. I love this. So my next question I want to ask is, from just the different art forms and different forms of storytelling. We have journalism, performance, literature. They all have the power to shift perspectives. How do you see storytelling influencing social movements or challenging dominant narratives? And this is something any one of you can answer. Yeah.
I can go on that one since I already kind of speaking to it. Absolutely. I think that for journalism anyways, is one of the first places we turn to understand the world, to understand what's going on in the world, to understand what issues are important and worth talking about. And so, and sometimes, as following up on what I was speaking to, when the folks who are analyzing, or they are the vehicle to transmitting that information, often they're coming from a certain viewpoint that may be influenced by their class, their race, their level of education, their income bracket. And so, again, this is one of the reasons I thought it was so important to bring some different viewpoints, to bring different perspectives into the newsroom on stories and issues that were impacting folks who often, the system doesn't work for them. The system isn't one that they can rely on. They can't turn to because it wasn't built for them. And so often there was this, these types of movements, protests, civil disobedience, anything that kind of wants to disrupt the status quo is met with a level of skepticism often from journalists and reporters. And so being able to come to those stories from a different perspective, I felt like was really important. I think specifically about one of the stories that I covered when I was at City was in Parkdale, the rent protests in Parkdale, where they were withholding rent to protest rent increases above the provincial guidelines. And I actually remember hearing specifically from folks there, that they appreciated my coverage and just my attitude toward them because of the way they were dealt with by many journalists. They were, kind of side-eyed, told, well, this is illegal, you've got to pay your rent, and do you expect this to actually work? And just kind of met with a lot of criticism and cynicism. And in the end, one of those rent protests was successful. So absolutely, I think that, there's opportunities to bring important issues to the mainstream through these mediums, but often there is some gatekeeping, there is a lack of awareness or understanding how to engage media, and so that's part of the work I do now in PR as well.
I think I can jump in on this question. I do a lot of work with young kids who have so many stories to tell, but might not have a platform to do so. And telling them that, look, I was only 16 when I wrote the book, here's the pen, you take it, you write the story, is very powerful. I met this young boy, I spoke in his classroom, and then a couple months later I got an email from his mom that said, my kid, he absolutely loved it. He had spent some time in a wheelchair, and you can't see it, but he was very touched by your story. And he said, if she's 17 and she can do what she's doing, I'm 7 and I can start a podcast. So he started a podcast, and it's really cool. I was a guest on the podcast, and seeing that transcend is incredible. I absolutely love hearing from young people because I think we have such an incredible story to share. We live in a world that's constantly changing. There's new technology coming up, and we're the ones who are trying to use it first. We're trying to learn everything, and I think it's important that we give the pen to the young people.
Love that. I love the comment just really about like criticizing, challenging these norms in terms of storytelling, and also giving voice to young people. There's this quote that really comes to mind that says, there's many ways to get up the mountain. Let's say the mountain is how our dreams, our goals, what we're trying to aspire to. There's many ways to get up the mountain. There's no wrong way to get up the mountain. But the only wrong way to get up the mountain is when you are on your path, and whether you're choosing to go up straight forward, you're zigzagging up, you're curving around, you're doing cartwheels, there's no wrong way to get up there, except for turning to someone else and saying the way that you're getting up there is wrong. And so when it comes to storytelling, I think it's important to realize that we all have a story.